The year is the 1530s. England groans under the weight of Henry VIII, a king whose will has become law, and whose law is carved not only in parchment, but in flesh. These are not gentle years. They are years of iron, of fire, of the rope and the axe. Years when the crown demands obedience not through persuasion, but through terror. And terror is not whispered in secret chambers. It is shouted from the scaffold. Tyburn, a name that trembles upon the lips of Londoners, a place more feared than the plague, more dreaded than the battlefield. It is no ordinary patch of earth. It is consecrated not by prayer, but by blood. Wooden beams rise here like blackened altars, and upon them men and women are offered up, not to God, but to power. The very air remembers. Every gust of wind carries echoes of screams. Every stone beneath the gallows is darkened with the memory of spilled life. Here justice is not private. It is not swift. It is theater. A grim performance staged beneath an open sky, where the condemned serve as unwilling actors and the crowd as hungry spectators. Children climb their fathers' shoulders to see. Merchants abandon their stalls to gather. Women press handkerchiefs to their lips, torn between horror and fascination. The spectacle belongs to all, for the crown wills it so. Look closely. The scaffold looms like a monument of dread, its timbers scarred with years of use. Chains glisten, their iron links ready to bite into wrists and ankles. Ropes coil like serpents, patient and unyielding. Wheels lean against the beams, reminders of torments yet to come. Nothing is hidden. Every tool of pain is displayed, for punishment here must not only be endured, it must be witnessed. And witness they do. The crowd surges forward as another soul is dragged to the noose. His face is pale, his body trembling, yet he cannot hide the truth. He is already broken long before the rope tightens. The executioner adjusts the knot with practiced indifference. A hush falls, heavy and expectant. Then the trap is sprung. The body jerks violently, twisting against the sky, legs kicking in desperate rhythm. His eyes bulge, his mouth opens as if to cry out, but no sound escapes. Only a strangled rattle that chills the marrow of all who hear. The crowd gasps. For a moment there is silence, as though the world itself holds its breath. Then comes the cheer, a roar rising from 1,000 throats. Some clap their hands, others laugh, others cross themselves in hurried prayer. Children gape wide-eyed, their innocence forever scarred by the vision. The condemned dangles, his convulsions slowing, his face slackening until at last the body hangs limp. And yet, this is not the end. For here, suffering is not a side effect. It is the very purpose. Death is not the sentence. Pain is. The rope may strangle, but it is cut short before mercy can claim the victim. The body is hauled down, still gasping, half alive, dragged through mud for the crowd to see his ruin. His agony is the lesson, his brokenness the warning. This is the pattern of Tyburn. This is the rhythm of Henry's England. Every execution is a sermon, every scream a scripture, every broken body a proclamation. That rebellion will be crushed, that disobedience will be torn from the flesh, that the crown's grip is absolute. Here, time itself bends around cruelty. Minutes stretch into eternities. A single cry seems to last an age. Hours pass, and still the torment lingers, for the condemned are not permitted the dignity of swiftness. Their suffering is drawn out like a performance, an art crafted in shadows and screams. The crowd is taught not only by words, but by the sight of a neighbor convulsing at the end of a rope, by the stench of charred flesh, by the echo of a body striking wood. In this theater, mercy is banished, compassion exiled. Only fear remains, sharpened into spectacle, and the people learn the lesson well. Each face in the crowd carries it home. Each child who watches carries it into adulthood. Each whispered tale around the hearth ensures that the terror of Tyburn endures long after the condemned have turned to dust. Such is the cruelty of these years, an age where law is written in pain, where justice is staged as performance, and where the body of every rebel, thief, or heretic becomes a stage prop in the crown's endless drama. This is England in the 1530s. This is the reign of fear. This is the theater of cruelty. His name is Richard Emmerson, a farmer, a husband, a man who once rose with the sun to meet the soil, whose hands bore the calluses of labor, whose back carried the weight of harvests that were never truly his own. For years he bent beneath the yoke of duty, first to his family, then to his Lord, and finally to a crown that demanded more than flesh and blood could give. When the king's collectors came, they came not with open palms but with clenched fists. They asked not for fair tribute, but for coin beyond what the fields could yield. They pried at cupboards already bare, tore at sacks of grain meant to keep children alive through winter's hunger. To deny was treason. To submit was starvation. Between those two blades Richard stood. See him now, bound in chains, dragged toward the scaffold like a beast driven to slaughter. His clothes hang ragged, worn by weeks of imprisonment, yet he carries himself not as a broken man, but as one still unbent. His shoulders are square. His gaze does not falter. His eyes burn, not with the wild frenzy of madness, but with the steady fire of conviction. He is no king, no lord, no knight. He is only a peasant, and yet in this moment he stands taller than all the powers that surround him. The crowd sees it too. Whispers ripple through the sea of faces like wind through wheat. Some jeer, spitting his name with scorn, calling him fool, traitor, rebel. Others remain silent, their eyes lowered, their hearts conflicted between fear of the crown and the dangerous thrill of seeing a man who dared. Among the poorer folk, mothers clutch their children closer. They hush their little ones, warning them never to follow such a path. Yet within their eyes flickers something else, something they dare not name aloud: pride. For Richard's defiance is their own, spoken aloud where their voices must remain quiet. In his chains they see their hunger. In his scars they see their toil. In his posture, proud even before the scaffold, they glimpse a vision of themselves not bowed, not broken, but standing upright against the storm. Richard Emmerson, a farmer, a husband, a man who tilled the soil. But when the king demanded coin beyond hunger's reach, Richard rose. He took his anger to the fields, and the fields followed, a rebel not by choice but by necessity. Yes, he was no schemer, no noble plotting in candlelit chambers. His rebellion was not written in ink upon parchment, but in sweat upon the earth. His army was no regiment of armored knights, but neighbors and kin, farmers armed with scythes, shepherds clutching staffs, wives carrying stones in their aprons. They marched not for glory but for survival. They shouted not for conquest but for bread. And though their uprising was small, though it was doomed from the moment it began, it carried within it something greater than numbers. The truth that even the lowest born can say enough. That even a man with nothing can stand against a crown that takes everything. The rulers called him traitor. The court named him seditious. But among those who live by the sweat of the earth, his name was spoken in hushed tones like a forbidden prayer. His courage was dangerous, yes, but it was also a spark. Look at him again, upon the scaffold. The iron bites into his wrists, the ropes chafe his skin, yet he does not bow his head. He dares to lift his chin, to meet the gaze of those gathered to watch. His eyes search the crowd, not for pity, not for mercy, but for recognition. He seeks the faces of those who know, those who understand, those who will remember. The guards shove him forward, the chains rattle, the scaffold creaks beneath his weight, but the sound that lingers above all is the whisper of his name, Richard Emmerson, passed from mouth to mouth, some in mockery, some in fear, and some in secret reverence. For in this moment, Richard is no longer only a farmer. He is defiance made flesh. He is rebellion given a face. And though the crown will claim his body, though the scaffold will claim his breath, his spirit has already escaped into the hearts of those who watch. This is the power of a peasant's defiance, to remind a kingdom that the earth itself can rise, that men born to toil may one day stand against the throne, that even in chains a farmer can look more like a king than the monarch who condemns him. The hall of justice is no place of mercy. It is a chamber built not for truth, but for verdicts already chosen. Its stones are cold, its air heavy, and within its shadows sits the machinery of power, silent, efficient, merciless. Into this place Richard Emmerson is dragged, chains clattering across the floor like iron snakes. He is set before a table where judges sit robed in crimson, their faces pale beneath high hats of office. They are not men seeking truth, but instruments of the crown, their tongues sharpened, not to question but to condemn. The hall is filled with murmurs, yet no voice dares to rise above the rest. For here silence is obedience, and obedience is survival. The charges are read, one by one, heavy as stones: rebellion, sedition, treason. The words echo against the vaulted ceiling, each syllable a nail driven into Richard's fate. Rebellion, for daring to gather his neighbors in protest. Sedition, for daring to speak against unjust taxes. Treason, for daring to stand, a peasant, against the will of a king. These words carry no weight of justice. They are weapons. Once spoken, they cannot be unsaid. They hang in the air, choking, final, like a verdict long decided before this day began. And yet Richard does not falter. Though his wrists are bound and his body weakened by prison's hunger, his voice rises steady, carrying through the hall like a blade cutting through fog. I stood for bread. I stood for my people. If that be treason, then let God judge me. The words hang there, fierce, defiant. They are not shouted in rage, nor whispered in fear. They are spoken with the calm of a man who knows that truth does not tremble, even when chained. The silence that follows is thick, dangerous. For a heartbeat, it feels as though the world itself pauses to listen. But no court under Henry's reign bends to truth. No gavel waits for justice. The hammer falls, sharp and final. A single strike echoes like thunder through the chamber, sealing Richard's fate. The judges do not hesitate, for hesitation is weakness, and weakness has no place in the theater of law. His sentence is proclaimed with chilling precision: to be hanged, cut down alive, and quartered. It is a sentence crafted not merely to kill, but to annihilate, to strip a man of dignity, of humanity, of wholeness. It is the crown's way of saying, not only will you die, you will be unmade. The hall does not stir. No one gasps, for they have heard such words before. No one pleads, for to plead is to share in his guilt. The officials record the sentence. The guards tighten their grip, and the machine of punishment moves forward without pause. It is not justice. It is routine. Look upon Richard's face. The camera lingers there, holding him in stillness while the hall churns with procedure. No fear shows in his eyes. No tears streak his cheek. What rests there is heavier than terror, deeper than despair. It is acceptance. The grim recognition of a man who understands that his fate was written long before this hall, long before this trial, perhaps even long before his rebellion began. For in this kingdom, a peasant who dares to rise is condemned the moment he stands. The trial is but a formality, a theater in which guilt is not discovered, but displayed. Richard knows this, and yet in his stillness, in his silence after the verdict, there is defiance still. He will not give the judges his fear. He will not bow, nor weep, nor beg. He offers them instead the dignity of his unbroken gaze, as though to say, "You may claim my body, but you will not claim my soul." The hall empties. The crimson robes vanish. The parchment is sealed. But the echo of Richard's words remains, lingering in the cold air long after all others have left. I stood for bread. I stood for my people. If that be treason, then let God judge me. Thus ends the trial, not with justice, but with certainty. Not with mercy, but with spectacle prepared. The crown has its verdict. The executioner has his orders. And Richard Emmerson, farmer turned rebel, steps closer to Tyburn's shadow. For in Henry's England, there is no justice for the poor, only punishment. And punishment is always public, always brutal, always without mercy. The day of execution dawns heavy, as though even the sky itself recoils from what must be done. Clouds hang low, thick and bruised, smothering the light. The air tastes of ash and damp earth. And yet, despite the omen above, the people come. They come in their hundreds, in their thousands, drawn not by accident, but by design. For the scaffold is not only a place of punishment, it is a theater, and today's play will be long remembered. Upon the wooden platform, Richard Emmerson is bound, His wrists are pulled tight behind him, his shoulders stretched until the joints groan. Rope bites into his skin, leaving angry welts, tearing open flesh already scarred from prison's cruelty. He stands not as a man, but as a symbol to be broken. The crowd knows it. The crown insists upon it. The hangman steps forward, a figure of grim routine. He does not look upon Richard as human, but as duty, as task, as work to be completed. His hands are steady as he fixes the rope, tightening it snug against the rebel's throat. The fibers press against skin, cutting into flesh, promising the slow constriction of air, the dreadful embrace of death. The crowd roars its approval. Children are lifted higher to see. Men elbow one another, faces twisted between anticipation and dread. Women murmur prayers, some for Richard's soul, others for their own safety. For in witnessing his fate, they are reminded of the price of defiance. The trapdoor falls. Richard's body plunges, jerked violently by the rope. His legs kick in desperate rhythm, his chest heaves, his face contorts. His body writhes as though caught between earth and sky, suspended in a purgatory of pain. The crowd gasps at the spectacle. Some cheer, others cry out. Many simply stare. But this is no swift hanging, no merciful end. Mercy has no place here. For in this theater of cruelty, death is not the goal. Suffering is. The rope is loosened. Richard gasps violently, drawing ragged, desperate breaths. He coughs, chokes, his body convulsing as air rushes back into lungs half crushed by strangulation. His knees buckle, his vision swims. Yet he is not allowed release. The hangman cuts him down, and he crashes to the ground in a heap of blood and sweat. Hands seize him, dragging his broken body across the scaffold. Splinters tear at his skin, his wrists raw from rope. He groans, not in surrender, but in agony. The crowd leans forward, hungry for more, for they know this is not the end. It is only the beginning. To suffer was the design. To endure pain was the decree. A man was not simply to die. He was to be broken, limb by limb, breath by breath. Every motion now is torment. Every breath is a battle. His chest rises and falls in jagged rhythm, each gasp carrying the weight of 1,000 eyes fixed upon him. His body is ruined, yet his spirit endures. He will not beg. He will not weep. He will not give the crown the satisfaction of his surrender. Dragged to his knees, Richard raises his head. His eyes, bloodshot and sunken, scan the crowd. He does not plead for their mercy, for he knows there is none. Instead, his gaze burns with something far more dangerous: defiance. Silent, unyielding, defiance. It is a look that says, "You may take my body, but my spirit remains mine." The crowd shifts uneasily beneath that gaze. Some jeer louder, desperate to drown the shame of what they feel. Others avert their eyes, unable to bear the weight of his stare. And among the poorest, among the mothers and children pressed to the edge of the crowd, there flickers a glimmer of reverence. For in Richard's torment, they see not only his ruin, but their own unspoken rebellion. Blood streaks his face, his wrists hang torn, his breath rattles in his chest, and still he endures, broken in body, unbroken in will. Thus is the cruelty of Tyburn, a place where suffering is not accident, but art, where punishment is not swiftness, but spectacle, where men are not simply killed, but dismantled before the eyes of the people. And upon this scaffold, Richard Emmerson learns the truth every rebel must face, that to defy the crown is to purchase pain with one's body and to pay in suffering beyond measure. Yet even as the torment deepens, even as his body collapses beneath its weight, the fire within him does not die. His eyes, dark and defiant, continue to meet the crowd, burning, enduring, unbroken. The scaffold creaks beneath the weight of silence. For a moment, time itself holds its breath. The crowd presses closer, as though drawn to the very edge of cruelty's stage. And then they come. 4 great horses, massive and restless, their hooves pounding against the earth like war drums. Steam rises from their nostrils, breath mingling with the cold air, as if even the beasts themselves sense the darkness of the task before them. Richard is dragged forward, his body weakened, his spirit battered yet still defiant. The ropes are brought thick, coarse, merciless, and tied with brutal precision, one to each arm, one to each leg. He is stretched across the scaffold, transformed from man into instrument, his body the canvas upon which the crown will paint its warning. The crowd shifts uneasily, some strain for a better view, eyes gleaming with the thrill of forbidden spectacle. Others murmur prayers, clutching rosaries, unable to turn away. Children whimper, their cries muffled against their mother's shoulders. Yet still, no one leaves, for to depart would be to deny the crown its theater. And here attendance is as much obligation as curiosity. The hangman lifts his hand, signaling the beginning. Whips slice the air, cracking like thunder. The horses lunge forward, muscles straining, eyes wide with the violence forced upon them. The ropes snap taut. Richard's body jerks violently, his limbs pulled in opposite directions. His back arches in unnatural contortion, his scream torn from deep within, echoing across the field. It is not a sound easily forgotten. It cuts through the air like steel, lingers in the marrow of all who hear. A sound that is both human and beyond human, the voice of flesh in rebellion against its own unmaking. Faces in the crowd twist in response. Some recoil, turning away in horror, hands covering mouths that tremble. Others lean forward with grotesque delight, their eyes hungry, their laughter sharp. Children sob openly, their innocence shattered by the cruelty of spectacle. Women faint, collapsing into the arms of neighbors. And still the ropes hold, still the horses strain, still the crown's will grinds a man into fragments before the eyes of his people. Thus ended Richard Emmerson, not as a man, but as an example. His flesh torn not for justice, but for warning. His agony painted into memory to silence those who dared to follow. Yes, this is not justice. It is theater, carefully staged. Every cry, every convulsion, every horror is part of the script. Richard's suffering is the lesson, his body, the text. The crown writes its law not on parchment, but on muscle and bone, in screams carried on the wind, in the silence that follows once those screams have ended. Look at the crowd again. See the faces, fear etched into some, fascination into others. The grotesque joy of punishment displayed openly, as though cruelty itself has become entertainment. This is the true power of Tyburn, not simply to kill, but to teach, to remind the living that rebellion carries not only death, but a death so terrible it must be remembered. And yet, even in this moment of horror, something stirs, for as Richard's body writhes, as his scream reverberates through the crowd, there are eyes that do not look away. Peasants who stand rooted, unable to move, unable to forget. In their hearts, the memory of this cruelty is not fear alone, but also fire. The crown hopes to silence rebellion, but memory has its own designs. The ropes tighten once more. Richard's body shudders, collapsing beneath agony no man can endure. His head falls back, his mouth open in a final cry that never fully forms. The crowd erupts, some with cheers, others with prayers, still others with stunned silence. The deed is done, the warning delivered, the example made. But long after the scaffold is emptied, long after the horses are led away, long after the crowd disperses, the echo of this moment remains. It clings to the earth, to the stones, to the very air of London. It travels in whispers down alleyways, across fields, into harsh-side tales told in hushed voices. Mothers will speak his name softly, fathers will mutter it with bitterness, children will remember it as the day they first saw the cruelty of kings. For though Richard Emerson's body is torn, though his life is taken, though his name is cursed by law, his defiance endures. His agony becomes legend. His scream, meant to silence rebellion, instead becomes its anthem. Thus does Tyburn claim another soul. Thus does England's crown enforce its rule. And thus does memory, fierce, dangerous, unquenchable, take root in the very soil beneath the scaffold. The execution ground grows silent. The roar of the crowd, once deafening, now fades into nothing but the low moan of the wind across Tyburn's field. Smoke drifts lazily, curling upward from torches trampled into the mud. The earth is stained dark where life was spilled, and the scaffold looms empty, stripped of its purpose for now, yet heavy with the memory of what has been done. The people scatter slowly, their voices subdued. Where moments ago there was a chorus of shouts, some of delight, some of horror, now there is only murmur. The ground that had been theater becomes graveyard. Mothers pull their children close, whispering words they cannot speak aloud in daylight. Fathers walk with lowered eyes, the weight of what they have seen pressing upon their shoulders heavier than any yoke of plow or tax. Above it all, the camera rises, the scaffold shrinks, the crowd dissolves into winding roads, and beyond it stretches London, vast, sprawling, indifferent. Towers and rooftops gleam faintly in the weak sun, chimneys smoke, markets bustle, as though nothing has changed. Life in the city moves on, untouched, unshaken. The crown relies on this indifference. The spectacle is meant to terrify, but also to normalize. Let cruelty become ordinary. Let executions become rhythm. Let rebellion be drowned in routine. And yet, memory is not so easily erased. Beneath the weight of silence, whispers stir. In alleys and taverns, his name is spoken softly, like contraband passed hand to hand. In cottages beyond the city walls, peasants murmur of Richard Emmerson, not as a traitor, but as a man who dared. Mothers whisper his story by firelight, shaping it into caution for their children or into inspiration, depending on how the flame flickers in their eyes. At dawn, in the fields where soil resists the plow, farmers speak of him in half tones, while their oxen strain against the weight of the earth. His story passes into furrows, into sweat, into bread baked from grain planted by hands that remember hunger. For in Richard's death, they see not only loss, but reflection, a mirror of their own lives, their own struggles, their own quiet rage. And so, his body was scattered, but his defiance was not. The crown claimed his flesh, breaking it upon the wheels of cruelty, tearing it upon the ropes of punishment. But the people claimed his memory. They gathered it piece by piece, not in public squares, but in whispers, in songs too soft to be written, in prayers that dared not name him, yet carried his spirit still. The officials will declare the execution a triumph. They will write in their ledgers that order has been restored, that rebellion has been silenced, that the law has prevailed. But ink fades and proclamations are forgotten. What lingers is not the parchment, but the pain. And pain, when shared by the many, becomes story. Richard's agony becomes story. His defiance becomes story. His scream at Tyburn becomes a shadow that stretches beyond the scaffold, beyond the reign of Henry, beyond the century itself. It travels through generations, whispered from father to son, from mother to daughter, until it becomes less history than inheritance. For pain fades, but memory lingers. And memory, like rebellion, cannot be wholly broken. Richard Emerson's body was scattered, but his defiance was not. The crown claimed his life, but the people claimed his memory. For pain fades, but memory lingers. And memory, like rebellion, cannot be wholly broken. The scaffold recedes into nothing more than a dark blot upon the earth, and yet, in the imagination, it looms taller than any tower. For monuments may be built in stone, but legends are carved in suffering, and Richard Emerson has become legend, not by choice, not by triumph, but by the simple, terrible fact of endurance. Not the scream, not the gavel, not the cheer of the crowd. What remains is the whisper, a whisper stronger than any decree, more enduring than any crown. The whisper of memory, the whisper of defiance, the whisper of a peasant who dared.